Midnight Patriot Nation.
Midnight Patriot Nation.
Podcasting around the world. It's time for another release of the Liberty Virus with your hosts, Spartan, Cryptic, Phoenix, and Burton.
Those guys are pretty intellectual.
Intellectually stimulating.
Strap in. Listen up.
Midnight Patriot Nation. Welcome to another edition of the Liberty Virus. Tonight we have Cryptic, Burton, yours truly, Spartan, and the incomparable returning guest, Will Leftridge, from the Will Leftridge podcast, independent journalist and conservative thinker. Will, welcome back, my friend. Thanks for coming.
Hey, thank you all so much for having me back. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm sure you're like us in that this last week you've spent the good majority of the time, filling out your background checks or using the gun show loophole to purchase both F-15s and nuclear weapons. Per the president's say so. Because everyone buys a gun without a background check and just ships it around the country willy-nilly. I mean, that's been your experience, hasn't it, Will?
But no, it hasn't happened like that. But pretty soon we'll have to come up with something, right?
I guess. So, obviously, our first segment tonight, we're going to be talking about what I like to call the Biden gun grab, or, his continued attempts to push a leftist narrative and have the Second Amendment overturned, crushed, or basically rendered unusable. I noticed that in his remarks when he talked about the quote, I believe it was Jefferson, that the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. First of all, he got really quiet. He muttered through it, and then he pretended that the actual words "shall not be infringed" are not actually written in the Second Amendment when he talked about the quote inherent restrictions from the day it was passed that you couldn't buy a cannon. I wanted to point out the obvious that A, yes, you could, and B, they weren't generally made available. So if you wanted a cannon, you pretty much had to make one yourself, considering how, George Washington and the Continental Army had to do that when they were fighting for the independence of this nation. Burton, what were your thoughts on good old Dementia Joe's comments and his make-believe? Was it a reimagining session like they talk about?
All right. Okay, thank you. No, I think that Joe Biden not only embellishes things, but he downright lies. The word "shall not be infringed" is in the United States Constitution. It is under the Second Amendment. If you could read it, take a few minutes of his time to read it. He had 40 years of being a senator to catch up on that. But no, I mean, I don't know. He's just so much out there that so much of his gibberish either confuses me because I try to wade through it, and I just get so frustrated listening to him that I just shut him up. So that's kind of where I stand on his goofiness on making up things as he goes along.
I think you're in the majority position here, buddy, because I have to, I have to fight back the nausea every time the man opens his mouth. Mr. Leftridge, talk to us, man. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Well, when we look at his actual plans, and this can be looked at by going to joebiden.com. It actually gives you his layout on what he's trying to do when it comes to firearms. And so when you first start looking at it, it sounds like it's a pretty good thing. The reason why I say that is because he has great stuff like, well, we're going to hold gun manufacturers accountable. That's like, okay, you can get with that. Then he says, we're going to get weapons of war off our streets. That's like, okay, that sounds pretty good. You keep going. He says, we're going to ban the manufacturers and sale of assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. You just keep going on, man. And what it comes down to, what it looks like they're actually trying to do, this is actually going to be law. And again, you can do this by going to joebiden.com. But what they're looking to do, they're trying to get assault rifles off the streets. Now, the reason why I have a problem with that is because if you take away everyone's assault rifle, or the good people at least, because there are a large amount of firearms that are on the street that are unregistered or have been stolen. So if you have an assault rifle that has been stolen and it's unregistered on the street, and they're taking away the firearms that are registered to people who already passed their background checks, you're taking the guns away from people that can, the firearms from people that can protect themselves, and you're leaving the firearms with the criminals. Now, you don't have to be a scholar to know that if you are in a home and your family's in there and you don't have the means to protect yourself, but there's a burglar on the outside who has these means to take whatever they want to take from you, my question to the Biden administration, even on the left, would be, what do you expect us to do at this point? Now, some people will say, well, if you have a pistol or if you have well, only thing you will be able to have is a handheld gun. You have to have if you have a shotgun or if you have a assault rifle, which you will not have under the Biden administration if they pass all this stuff through Congress, which is not likely, but you will not be able to protect yourself. And then you'll have to depend on the police that the left is also trying to defund. So not only will you not have your assault rifle to protect you and your family from a criminal, you won't have anyone to call, because a lot of people are leaving the police department. We see this in Wisconsin. We see this all over the world. I think that, what is that, Chicago, where there are several people who are walking away from the police department. So the police are gone. You have no way to protect yourself. What's next for us? That would be my question for anyone that's on the left.
Well, that's a hell of a good point. I mean, I hate to spout platitudes. You guys know this, but making good people defenseless doesn't make bad guys harmless. Number one. And number two, when I call 911, I expect the cops and the emergency services to show up, at a much faster pace than with, let's say, our local pizza chain. Okay. That's you summed it up very, very well. Is what's next. It's also worth noting that for this whole obsession that the left has with assault weapons bans. What happened during the last assault weapons ban? Anybody remember 1999 April 20th? Anybody? The Columbine massacre. And it was pulled off and facilitated by two of the weapons specifically on the assault weapons bans list, Tech 9s. And if nobody remembers the Columbine massacre, because I realize it's now been 22 years, and perhaps some of you younger Gen Zers don't know what happened, or it's only been in mythos. Look it up. It was an absolutely horrifying event that two young men who had they lived through it would have been charged as adults because they took a year to plan it. They executed 13 students and I believe 2 teachers. And it was one of the most horrific days in the history of the nation. And I would like to say that happened during the Clinton administration and during the last assault weapons ban. Cryptic, what do you got on the topic, my friend?
Well, to me, I think what next? To me, it sounds a lot like, what is it, the brown coats, where you have if they defund the police and they do all these weapon bans, all of a sudden then it becomes a government police.
Well, yeah, right. And as history has shown us, anytime it's only the state that has firearms, that never works out well for the populace. Go ahead, Ben.
So to take away from, Biden's speech on the Constitution, how he can't even seem to understand what's in there, that's really troubling to begin with, because as we've seen, a lot of their policies are trying to go against everything that is in the Constitution, that is our given rights. And I was reading something where it was talking about a large percentage, I think it was 60 or 70%, didn't even understand that the Constitution is the law of the land anymore, from what they've been taught in school and everything else, that they don't even know that the Constitution is the actual law of the land. They don't know. How sad is that? And like 30% don't even know that the first 10 amendments are the Bill of Rights. So they're all just being indoctrined in school and everything to believe that guns are bad, that basically they're being indoctrined to believe whatever the left believes, which is really horrible for our republic and democracy. And I just think where they're headed next, if they take away, they're punishing law-abiding citizens, trying to stop criminals from having guns in their hands. But as we all know, if you look at a lot of the places that are gun-free zones, they're the ones that are having the most violence. They're the ones having the mass shootings. So obviously that's not working.
Criminals prefer soft targets. Criminals prefer soft targets. More to your point, you brought up something a little bit even more disturbing. And the most disturbing thing, what I was just talking about was, we've spoken on other episodes about how the Department of Education and basically public education nationwide, they've stopped teaching an accurate version of U.S. history. There's no emphasis on world history. Something more disturbing is, has the indoctrination included the fact that rights come from government and not from one's creator? That's number one. And number two, are Biden's comments commensurate with the actual thinking in the DC swamp, that they have pacified the citizenry so heavily that now it doesn't, you can't fight back. And what I mean by can't fight back is, I mean, sure, any lawful gun owner with the means can open fire. That's fine. But since they control the media narrative and essentially they've made it completely illegal to shoot back, I mean, what does that do? What does that say about, the actual state of our nation? I mean, has tyranny arrived and we've all been blind to it? I mean, Burton, what do you got on that?
Well, let me go on this one. I'm going to answer the question. Try to answer your question.
Sure. Go ahead.
I'll tell you what, Paul. Repeat the question again.
Sure. What I was saying was, has tyranny arrived and we've all been blind to it due to the lack of proper education in public schools as it pertains to the Constitution? Because as we know here, the Constitution is not a statement of citizen rights. It is a set of chains for the government, number one, and that rights are actually we are endowed by our Creator, whomever you hold that to be. So essentially, we are free from our first breath, according to the philosophy of this nation. So, like I said, through education, have we allowed tyranny to creep up and become a reality in the United States?
The answer is yes, and the reason why I say it that way is because you notice a lot of high school, I'll go with high school. I'll stick with that. Junior high school curriculums no longer teach ethics, history, civics, that kind of stuff. Stuff that when I grew up through the 60s and 70s, going through school, those kind of things were brought into you. I mean, every morning had to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I guess I get this from a lot of different talk show guys I listen to. Is that, first of all, get rid of the Department of Education. Let the states handle their education for their kids. Because what's happened now is, and I've noticed this a lot with this CRT stuff, that they want to go back to the teaching of the Constitution, go back to civics, to a course on ethics, politeness, just how to be a good human being instead of being such a radical. Teach somebody how to be a radical community organizer. Because that's going to lead up to an absolute disastrous result.
I absolutely, totally agree. Will, talk to me, man. Where you stand on that?
Well, first I would like to point out we have to talk about some of the harsh things when we talk about firearms. Okay, so I think that was in 2019, because 2020 was such a blur. But in 2019, they had a shooting, and I believe that was Louisville, Kentucky, where a gentleman entered into a Kroger and opened fire on African Americans, killing. I believe he killed two or three people. And what made him stop was not the police. It was a registered gun owner in the Kroger's where this happened at, who fired at him, who made him actually run, and he was eventually captured by the police.
Absolutely.
So what we're seeing in the community is what's being taught versus the reality. The reality of it is there are criminals in the streets. There are bad people in the world. You would have to be a lunatic to think anything else. But where the problem comes in that is when you try to put every person that owns a firearm legally, that went through the process, as a criminal, and to tell this person that they cannot have a high capacity magazine, they cannot own an assault rifle, they cannot own a certain amount of firearms per household. All this is going into legislation. Again, this can be viewed at JoeBiden.com. This is what he's planning on doing and putting into law. But when we're seeing this going on in several places, we see a major problem. Whereas, again, they are trying to institute something that is not constitutional. You have several great guys out here who is not afraid to talk about the hard things, such as the government trying to take complete control over people's lives, trying to take away your right in front of your face and saying that they're giving you a slice of chocolate cake.
Absolutely.
It's horrible what we're seeing. Now, at the same time, not everything that Joe Biden is proposing is bad. I am fine, 100% fine, with there being a background check. I am 100% fine with them not giving a firearm to a person who is kind of sketchy, right? So all of that is very good. All that is something that we all can agree on that should be going on. However, it's what already is going on. Now, they have something called the Charleston loophole, which some people can argue that it should be closed, some people can argue that it should be open. So there are a lot of loopholes out there that criminals are getting through. Even some good people are getting through these loopholes as well. Some business owners are doing it. So they have to look at that. However, the overall message that they're pushing on people is guns are bad and people who own guns are bad. And that is not a fact. That is a myth. That is wrong. Whereas I work with a great organization called the Armed Citizen Project, who are out there trying to help single mothers get their gun license and get the means to protect themselves. Again, guns don't kill people. People kill people. That's what we have to face.
A total dead. And that's been the reality. Anybody that would deny that statement is completely delusional. People have been killing people since, they started recording history, and probably even before that. I don't think anybody on this panel minds a background check. My problem is and this, I'm speaking only for myself. I have a severe problem with anything the Democrats propose or anything that anyone proposes as gun control for the following reason, because how they label it and package it and what they tell you about it does not cover the scope of the power that it transfers to the government, either federal, state, or otherwise. Okay. And let's not forget, there is no legal definition of an assault rifle. There's no legal definition. There's not even a descriptor. Okay. Assault is an action. There are certain types of firearms that are highly effective in certain situations. Just like your toolbox, there's a tool for every job. Okay, well, it just depends on the job you want to do versus what firearm you want to carry. All right, number one. Number two, the notion that somehow, as you brought out, the notion that somehow bad guys care about gun laws is absolutely asinine. It's not true. Okay. The third is that, somehow I'd like to know one single program that the government has instituted as it pertains to the decreasing of rights of the populace has been effective in any way. I mean, murder's illegal. End of discussion. Doesn't matter how you do it. Okay. Drugs in the vast majority of the country are illegal. And we all see how well prohibition has worked out. I mean, there can be no counter argument to the fact that the intention as stated to the citizenry is not the intention is not the result that's intended by the government, if that makes any sort of sense. Cryptic, you want to chime in on this one?
Well, to me, I think that with the gun laws, I mean, the federal government is just, they've constantly overreached. Regardless who has been in office, the government continues to try and be more and more in your lives and controlling what you can do and what you can't do. That I think, so like Texas here, they just signed a law that doesn't require a license or anything outside of the normal to do open carry.
Yeah, constitutional carry. Way to go, Texas. Well done.
Now, I still do agree, background checks should happen. I know there are some for and against on background checks as far as, I forget who I was talking to, but there's some service members that have retired that because when they do their background check, they're not allowed to carry a weapon. They're not allowed to get licensed or anything. Now, some of them, yeah, I get if they have, if there's a mental disorder or dishonorably discharged or anything like that. But I think that still kind of limits some people that can carry. Now, that's not to say, that there shouldn't be maybe a 5-year wait on anyone who leaves the service before they can register and carry a gun. That's hard to say, as I've never served, so I don't know the mentality and all the stipulations that go with that. But I do agree with the mental health. However, the other part to for or against is what really qualifies a person to determine whether they have mental health issues or not. And the only reason I say that is, like, if you go to, some of these kids, right, in school, the teachers or the counselors or whatever label them as, ADHD or some sort of mental disability or something like that, when they're completely wrong.
Well, that's really the question is that A, who gets to decide who's crazy and why, number one, and number two, how do you pull that off without violating HIPAA? People have a right to medical privacy, and not to conflate issues here, but those that are pro-abortion, make the argument that abortion is constitutional, and that's not the basis of that decision. If you read Roe versus Wade, what it clearly spells out is that abortion was legalized, or I should say decriminalized, because it is a medical procedure and a matter of privacy between the patient and a physician. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that the actual act itself is constitutional. It was decided based upon the merits of privacy. But obviously, I mean, the issue is more complicated. And my argument would be that the government can't solve the problem. Right? The ideas that they've pitched haven't solved the problem, and there's no plan for getting rid of the black market. I mean, as solid evidence, the New York City Police Department cut their major crime units during this last round of defunding, and as such, gun crimes have gone up something like 400 or 500%, along with the murder rate. And forgive me, I know that's not. I know those percentages aren't 100% verifiable, but that seems to be the quote that I believe I heard was somewhere between 300 and 500%. But we're going to leave that. We're going to leave this segment here for the moment. Midnight Patriots, hang out with us, and we'll be right back.
The caffeine-fueled insanity will continue right after this.